How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji, host of Tier Talk, and I want to talk about the tension that can occur in a correctional facility after a major incident like a riot or a death of an officer. The reason why I want to talk about this is I want to try to see if we can build an understanding from both perspectives, perspective from management and perspective from Frontline. Now, again, this is just an objective conversation, a conversation meant to build dialogue. And again, it's not all inclusive, but let's just say something major occurred. Let's just say that a riot occurred or a death of an officer. So let's start with management. I get the phone call that this has occurred, correct? So right off the bat, after I find out exactly what happened, I got to go back and check policy because I need to know if policy was violated. And again, it's not so much to go after staff and kind of hold staff responsible at this point. It's more of, let's see exactly what happened. Because remember, when an incident occurs that's major, such like a riot or, again, a death of an officer, there's going to be a scramble because both parties are kind of looking to hold somebody responsible, and then obviously both parties looking to push the blame on either management or Frontline. And that's what's divisive, and that's unfortunately the nature of the beast, and it's sad. You know, when there's questions to be answered and there's pressure put on individuals, there's going to be just a bit of a scramble because, again, it's we need to be collective at this point. We need to be united, but unfortunately, the way it's done here, there's going to be a divide because management has a different perspective or a different goal or a different set of responsibilities than the front line may have at this point. Again, it's not to negate or minimize the responsibility they have for each other. It's just a perspective that will be given at that moment based on the pressure that's being put from above. So again, so I find out about what happened. I look at policy. I get understanding of policy and how policy would specifically play out with this incident. And then I'm going to say, okay, well, if there was a violation of policy, the first thing I'm going to want to do is understand why that policy was violated before I even hold anybody responsible. Understand that? I want to understand first why policy was violated. Okay, so I'm looking for a good justification because remember, guys, corrections is forever evolving. Corrections is literally, we're in a system where human behavior policies don't always cover everything. So sometimes there's some discretion, you know, that we should allow Frontline to utilize. But again, if by chance policy was violated and the person that, let's say, violated it had a reason, and that reason begins from the point of why prior policy did not work, I have to listen to that because that's part of the evolution. That's part of the change that may need to have to be employed. I also want to make sure that I didn't violate policy. I mean, remember, I'm in a management position. What about if I gave out an order? Maybe there were some budget cuts and I pulled people that shouldn't have been pulled. Well, now I'm in violation myself. And technically as management, I should know the policy. I should. So hopefully I didn't make that bad call. But having said that, I also am going to look for myself, self-preservation. You know, did I do something that could have had a ripple effect in which policy was already broken? That's a problem. And now the officers that are involved now, they didn't break any policy. They were kind of scrambling, and maybe it was what I did that wind up causing them to get hurt. Because remember, policies are our safeguards. They're supposed to be put in place to protect us. And also, again, dealing with the evolution of the facility, the changes that were good or bad are usually what develops our policy. You know, if you're good, we stay with it. If they're bad, we avoid it. But again, you know, if we look from the Frontline may be frustrated because they had concerns. And their concerns were brought up to higher management and maybe could have been ignored. You know, so Frontline's going to look to say, hey, we told you so. We told you this was going to happen. And nobody listened. And now it's happened. So they're mad because they're looking at a situation that they think could have been prevented. So now look at the divide we have here. Right off of a major incident. Right now we should be together, you know, working collectively. But the nature of the beast is going to have us divided because of human nature. It literally is. It's human nature. You know, we're both looking to kind of alleviate the responsibility from ourselves, and that's because we see each other as separate. You know, we see each other as isolated. We see each other in separation. You know, management sees themselves one way, Frontline sees themselves in another way. So now we have two different parties scrambling, each one pushing responsibility on the other. And again, it's just the nature of the beast, and it's sad, but it's true. So now, moving forward, again, not being able to really do anything about this animosity, this tension, because again, it's inevitable, especially during times like this, where you see situations like this in North Carolina and Delaware. You're going to see Frontline very frustrated because, hey, we brought your concerns up, you chose not to listen, and now look what happened. And then you get management trying to push the blame back to Frontline so it can alleviate the liability from the institution or the agency. And that's another perspective that Frontline has, by the way. If policy was good and policy was written, I'm saying it would suffice for the, it was a good policy, and management's not at fault for breaking any part of that policy. And Frontline completely broke that policy without any form of justification. They just broke it, maybe because they did not take time to know it or whatever the case may be. But let's say at this point we can put the fault on custody, which is sad. We don't want to do that. But let's just say hypothetically that happens. Well, now the liability will be kind of pushed away from the institution and brought back to the individual level. And as management, sad to say, management is looking to do that. But again, we're just understanding the perspective. I'm not trying to, cause a divide here, but let's just understand the perspective so we can maybe move forward from this perspective. So they're looking to alleviate the liability. And that could be tough, especially for a management person like myself who really has a lot of faith in that front line. And then when they're doing their research, they find out, wow, Frontline really dropped the ball on this one. This wasn't fault from management. It wasn't any fault from something we did at this point. So now it kills the person now that's going to have to literally kind of protect the facility now. They're going to protect the facility because, again, of the violation of policy without any justification. But let's just talk. I want to go back to management real quick now. This is to you, management. All because a policy has been broken. It doesn't mean that the employee was definitely in the wrong. Because again, we're dealing with the evolution. We're dealing with human behavior. Nothing can be predicted. Literally. I mean, we try our best to, but not everything can be predicted. So the issue here is if someone did break policy and we figure out, kind of after investigating what we got going on, who should be held responsible, at least to bring up initially, we need to ask them, why did you break policy? And we need to listen to their justification. If their justification is really originating from why policy was not suffice, why it could not help them, and then they begin their argument after that based on what they had to do, well, then we need to go back and look at policy. And if changes have to be made, we need to make that changes. But don't do this, though. Don't change policy knowing that something was wrong, but that as kind of like a scapegoat, write up staff anyway, because that's wrong. And that happens a lot. I've seen policies change because they know that policy really wasn't effective, but you're still holding the people who kind of had to violate policy to do what's right based on good intent. And I also want to mention, when it comes to policy, sometimes we don't realize it, but we put people in a predicament to break policy. And when I'm talking about breaking policy, I'm talking about breaking policy on automatic impulse. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example here. When we work in corrections, we're going to see a lot of crazy stuff. So now imagine being an officer working third shift, and you see an inmate in a double lock, two inmates. But you see one of the inmates in the cell trying to kill themselves. So now, as this inmate's trying to kill himself, we have the natural reaction. We want to save lives. We want to go in that cell, and we want to stop that suicide from occurring. And we have the keys, and we have the means to do so. But policy states, wait for backup. And that's very hard for an officer who has the impulse to save that individual's life. He has that impulse. And when he's calling for backup and backup's not coming, that officer has the key and it's doing whatever he can to fight that impulse. But having said that, at one point they're going to make a call, and they may open up that cell. This could be a setup. You don't know. That's where the violation could be. Open up that cell and save that inmate's life. Now, there's a good intent here. There's a little bit of an issue with this now. It's not so black and white, but there's a good intent by this officer to save this inmate's life. And some management may go ahead and say, well, wait a second. Even though he saved this inmate's life, there's the bigger picture, the fact that he could have sacrificed the facility by opening up that door without the proper backup available. So there may be an intent by management to write this officer up, even though that the intent was good. The officer tried to do the right thing. But having said that, I also still like to blame management on one thing here for this specific incident, is that the officer has the key, which obviously aids the impulse. But also, if only backup can be there when that cell is opened, then why are we giving that unit officer the key to begin with? Doesn't need the key. When backup arrives and the team is there and we're able to open up the cell door as per policy, then we open up then we open up those doors. But in the meantime, we need to protect that officer from that impulsive decision, that decision to save lives. So again, when we review things as management, we want to make sure one thing is that we're not violating policy when we give orders. That's the truth. We're listening to our front line and open to possible changes if need be. Again, front line's immediate to those areas that may be affected. So we have to have that open door policy with front line. And we're not looking to punish right away. We're looking to understand what happened, listen to front line, see if they have a justification, see if they know what policy is. That's one thing. And see if maybe when they violated policy, maybe it was because the policy was at fault. And then if we have to make a change, and we make that change, we don't go back and punish staff for violating the prior policy. So again, this is just an effort. I hope this builds some dialogue, just some understanding about perspective. But again, management has the perspective of the agency because that's kind of what's coming down. They got questions they got to answer. And right off the bat, they got the pressure of the agency who's going to look to separate themselves from the person who did wrong. Because that's liability. So management's going to come at that perspective. And I'm telling you, in my case, I'm hoping that we can somehow, even if there was a violation, we can somehow stand with custody on this, stand with that, that front line who had to make that choice. Because again, there's going to be discretion within those policies. It's not black and white. So if there is a violation, let's try to understand what that violation is before we start writing everybody up. And then front line, if they have concerns, we got to listen, because those concerns can better those policies. And then we could change those policies and have a more effective running facility. A facility that may be able to, when something happens, we can come together because we know we work together to aid in the running of that facility. But again, the nature of the beast when an incident happens will cause a division. So we need to try to understand each other's perspective and literally try to bring us back. And that's the key. Management's going to do that. Management's going to hopefully look at everything in an effort to bring things back. Same thing with Frontline. We need to try to bring things back so we can work collectively together. That's why I think also, if we're involved in listening to Frontline communicate and involved in helping, make those good policies, because remember, Frontline's affected by those areas, then we get a better understanding of what is needed. Frontline gets a better understanding of what is needed. Plus, they help. They were involved in the policy. You're giving them a chance to speak. Then it's just a matter of us sticking together. In case we get questioned, and why this was put in play. And I think that kind of helps. That kind of helps because now you're starting to see the teamwork, and it's teamwork that helps a correctional facility run. As always, guys, the show was Tier Talk. Love you guys.